Here's a murder mystery that remains unsolved to this day. Mikio Miyazawa, Yasuko Miyazawa, Nina Miyazawa, and Rei Miyazawa were ruthlessly murdered in a home invasion during the night by an unknown assailant, who then remained in the house for many hours before disappearing from the scene. The Japanese police set out immediately on a large-scale investigation that uncovered the killer's DNA and many specific details and clues about their identity, but the perpetrator has to this day evaded capture and never been identified. On the New Year's Eve Sunday, the 31st of December in the year 2000, the lifeless bodies of Mikio Miyazawa, Yasuko Miyazawa, Nina Miyazawa, and Rei Miyazawa were discovered by Yasuko's mother, Haruko, at their house in the neighborhood of Setagaya in the western suburbs of Tokyo. An investigation of the crime scene by the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department concluded that the family had been murdered on December 30th at approximately 11:30 p.m. And then, in an act probably considered one of the creepier aspects of this whole story, the killer remained inside the house with the victims for several hours. The community that had once contained over 200 families had now been narrowed just down to 4, the Miyazawas and the relatives living next door, and 2 other families that lived on their street. Besides that, it was fundamentally a ghost town of sorts. The majority of the activity in the local area was actually coming from the local skate park directly behind the Miyazawa family home. This was also the busiest part of the ever-expanding skate park, and this led to some issues for the Miyazawa family. You see, the skate park was located directly behind the house, separated from them only by a fence. During the week leading up to New Year's Eve, Mikio had actually confronted a group of rather loud and obnoxious young teenagers at the skate park for making too much of a racket. At around the same time, a witness reported seeing him confront a group of young rebels that belonged to Bosozoku, a Japanese motorcycle gang of sorts. Due to the increased foot traffic of the park behind them, which the city was planning on expanding even further, the Miyazawas had made plans on moving, much like many families from the area who had already done so. It was December of 2000, and in just a few months, they would be moving. All they needed to do was rough out the skate park antics for a few more months, and then they wouldn't have to worry about it ever again. Unfortunately, as fate would have it, they would never get that chance. The killer is believed by police to have gained access to the home during the night by climbing up a tree and then removing the window screen of the second-story bathroom. The killer then used his bare hands to strangle Rei, who was sleeping in his room on the second floor of the home, killing him via asphyxiation. Mikio rushed up the first-floor stairs after he had heard the disturbance in Rei's room, fighting and injuring the killer until finally being stabbed in the head with a sashimi knife. A police report showed that part of the sashimi knife's blade had even broken off inside Mikio's skull, and the killer then attacked Yasuko and Nina with the broken knife, but then ultimately needed to retrieve a knife from the Miyazawa's own kitchen to complete the bloody murders. Police also believe the attacker continued to stab Nina and Yasuko far beyond the point at which they had died, with no suggested or obvious purpose. The killer remained inside the Miyazawa's house anywhere from 2 to 10 hours using the family home computer, helping themselves to barley tea, melon, and ice cream from their refrigerator, even using the toilet and leaving his feces in it without flushing, treating his injuries using the family first aid kit and other sanitary products, and even taking a nap on the sofa in the second-floor living room. Later, an analysis of the family computer revealed that it had connected to the internet in the morning after the murders at 1:18 a.m., and again at around about 10 a.m. This was around the time Yasuko's mother Haruko entered the home and discovered the bloody murders. Haruko became suspicious after being unable to reach her daughter on the phone. The killer had unplugged the phone line and visited the house but received no answer after trying the doorbell several times. Authorities believe the killer had stayed in the house until at least 1:18 a.m., but the computer usage at 10 a.m. could have also been accidentally triggered by Haruko during her discovery of the crime scene. Police have been able to deduce several of the very specific clues to the perpetrator's identity, but in any case, they have been unable to produce or apprehend a suspect. It was determined that the killer had eaten string beans and sesame seeds the previous day after analyzing feces from the killer in the Miyazawa's bathroom. They determined that the clothes and sashimi knife left behind at the scene by the killer had been purchased in Kanagawa Prefecture. Police also learned that only around 130 units of the killer's sweater were made and sold, but they have only been able to track down 12 of the people who had bought the sweaters. Some trace amounts of sand were also found inside the fanny pack that the perpetrator left at the scene, which after analysis was determined to come from the Nevada desert, more precisely the area of Edwards Air Force Base in California. The investigation into the murders is among the largest in Japanese history, involving over 240,000 investigators who have collected over 12,500 pieces of evidence. In 2015, it was reported that 40 officers were assigned to the case full-time. Every year, the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department makes a pilgrimage each year to the house for a memorial ceremony. In 2019, it was reported that 35 officers are assigned to this case. The TMPD is still currently offering a 20 million yen reward to any person who can help officers to find clues that lead to a suspect and/or close the case. In addition, the TMPD announced that the Miyazawa house will be torn down because of its age, risk of collapsing, with the interior already showing signs of some rather significant deterioration. All evidence related to the case has been kept in custody. As of December 2020, 13,658 tips have been provided to the police. Tokyo police found the killer's DNA and fingerprints in the Miyazawa's house, but none matched the databases of the Tokyo police, indicating that they likely do not have a criminal record of any kind. The killer's blood was gained during an analysis of the murder scene that revealed some traces of type A blood, which would not have belonged to any of the Miyazawa family members. A DNA analysis of the type A blood determined the killer is male, and very possibly mixed race, with maternal DNA suggesting a mother of European descent and paternal DNA indicating a father of East Asian descent. It's considered possible that the European maternal DNA comes from a distant ancestor from the mother's line rather than a fully European mother. These results led to Tokyo Metropolitan Police to seek assistance through the International Criminal Police Organization, as the killer may not be Japanese or present in Japan. Physically, the killer is believed to be around 170 centimeters tall and of thin build. This was determined through the clothing left at the scene. The police also estimate the killer was born between 1965 and 1985, anywhere from about 15 to 35 years old at the time of the attack, due to the physical strength required for entering the Miyazawa's house and the force needed in committing the murders. The Miyazawa's wounds also indicate that the killer is highly likely to be right-handed. Because the investigators cannot work out the motive of the killer, police cannot narrow their focus. The investigators who first worked on the case have now retired, and as such, the family fears time is running out. If you found this video interesting, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps us greatly.